Hey, good Tuesday, everybody. Welcome back and happy election day to everyone watching in the United States. We do have some very active weather out there ongoing to talk about, including newly formed tropical storm Rafael that could potentially become a pretty powerful hurricane over the next day or two before striking Cuba and eventually working into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, that's not the only story. We do have ongoing active severe weather and flooding concerns even across portions of the lower 48 and a new storm that is beginning to work on through that will begin to bring stronger impacts by this coming weekend. And I'm going to go ahead and give you an update on all of that in today's video. Now, if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. Like the video, consider sharing with somebody that you think might find it useful. And comment, let me know where you're all watching from on this Tuesday. With that said, though, let's go ahead and jump right in to that forecast. So taking a look at current observations, or at least current satellite imagery across the lower 48 and the western Atlantic, you'll notice a couple of hot spots. First, over the country itself, we have this big-time front working on through, and this could spark off some severe weather today, but definitely some flooding rains. For some folks, we already have flood watches and warnings up for a lot of folks, but that's not the only storm system in the United States. Take a look at the Pacific Northwest, another new storm beginning to work on through. That one could bring hazardous impacts as well, including some big-time mountain snowfall out west, and the potential once again for severe weather come this weekend. Now, obviously, that's not the only thing you're seeing on your screen. You're looking down into the Caribbean, and here we go. We now have Tropical Storm Rafael, which formed last night and is expected to strengthen into Hurricane Rafael over the next day or so before eventually striking western Cuba and getting into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, this morning, beginning to become a better organized storm system. You'll see that convection firing up, starting to slowly get that shrimp look to it, which is often a sign of a storm that is wanting to strengthen. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, this is kind of what I mean by the shrimp look, if you kind of get the general idea there. So again, it's starting to get that look, but especially I think as we go later through today, the storm will continue to look better in presentation and thus strengthen as well as it eventually moves on through the Cayman Islands and then Cuba. But currently Jamaica getting it pretty good with these rain bands. So if you're watching from Jamaica, I know I've got a couple viewers from the island. Let me know what you're seeing. Let me know how rough it is out there. Would love to hear those ground reports. All right, future track here for what is, again, Rafael. Currently, I should add, a 60-mile-an-hour tropical storm. Pressure's in and around 990 millibars. Latest track calls for a movement up through the Cayman Islands through really overnight tonight. So probably about the time the sun goes down onward is when things will be the worst there. And we do have hurricane warnings in effect for the island. Again, this is a strengthening storm system, so hurricane conditions will be possible there. And then hurricane warnings also for much of western Cuba, as we are expecting a strong hurricane, potentially a Category 2, here to make landfall sometime Wednesday afternoon, probably just after the 1 o'clock hour there, through the western half of the country. So again, an impactful storm for sure. That's also not the only thing. We do have another area we're watching over here with possible development here, running a 20% chance of development over the next 7 days here through the Turks and Caicos, through the southeastern Bahamas, and then north of Hispaniola and Puerto Rico. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. But after Cuba, Rafael going to get into the Gulf of Mexico, and all eyes turn to the United States on where exactly does the storm go and how strong is it going to be? And that's what we'll go ahead and talk about right now. All right, so one big, I think, ingredient here for the strength of Rafael are those sea surface temperatures. Now, obviously, we talk about this all the time, and generally, this is not a problem in the Gulf of Mexico or the Caribbean, but we are now a week into November, and it's at this point that parts of the Atlantic Ocean begin to cool down as the seasons change, just like any other part of the world, and that will be a pretty decisive factor in the Gulf of Mexico. However, into portions of the Caribbean, not so much. much. The storm is still moving over very warm ocean temperatures. Now, it will cool off a little bit right here over that western tip of Cuba as some of those coastal kind of shelf waters begin to cool off a little bit. So that will definitely help us. But then the storm gets into the Gulf of Mexico, where for the most part, temperatures are favorable enough for a strengthening tropical cyclone. Anything in that yellow color and brighter, or anything 26 degrees Celsius and brighter, generally favorable for tropical strengthening. But notice, again, we're going to have a bit of a force field or a protective barrier, again, of shelf waters here along the Gulf Coast of the United States. That is going to help to limit any big time strengthening, at least along the immediate coastline. But again, out deeper into the Gulf of Mexico, still plenty warm enough for tropical strengthening, even if it's not as strong as it was maybe a month or two ago when we had Milton and Helene move through these same areas. All right, another important ingredient for tropical development is moisture content. Do we have a lot of moisture in the vicinity, or is dry air going to help to limit the storm? Well, currently right now, this afternoon and into this evening, plenty of moisture around the storm. Here he is, again, working through the Cayman Islands. And again, you'll notice all of this green and kind of bluish color around the storm. These are high moisture content values, high relative humidity. But you'll also notice there is some dry air here into the southeastern United States and into the Gulf of Mexico. This should help to limit strengthening of the storm as it gets into the Gulf, and you'll notice that happens here. Some of that dry air kind of tries to wrap around the storm, and eventually by this weekend kind of really takes over the core of the storm and helps to kill it off, at least on the GFS model. And then I'll mention right behind it, here is that next disturbance that we need to watch. This one I'm not as worried about, but again, could bring some rain to some folks, could even bring some gusty winds. But I do think even more dry air will help to limit that next potential. And that's why currently it only has a 20% chance of development. Should that change, though, obviously, I'll be the first to let you know. All right, wind shear values, another important thing. Blue below average wind shear, red above average wind shear. And through the next couple of days, wind shear is going to be pretty limited where the storm is into the Gulf of Mexico and into the northwestern Caribbean. So this is something that could allow the storm to strengthen. It could help it out here in the long run. And it even kind of stays that way as the storm moves in before eventually, again, as it gets near landfall sometime this weekend, you'll notice much stronger wind shear over the southeastern United States, kind of this belt of strong winds from Texas all the way into the Carolinas. That'll help to kind of rip apart any storm system as it gets much closer to the coast. But again, ingredients just in general, I think, are going to be less favorable on that final stretch to landfall. But beforehand, again, now into the Caribbean and even into those first kind of half of the Gulf of Mexico, pretty favorable conditions for a continuing strengthening trend, or at least a maintaining of current strength trend over these regions. And because of that, I do think we are going to have a system that does, again, overall strengthen in the short run. So now through the time that we get landfall in Cuba, again, likely to peak out up near Category 1 or Category 2, potentially even, before making landfall into Cuba tomorrow afternoon. After that, you'll notice most of our models kind of level out the strengthening, and I agree with that as well. I think the first day or two that the storm is in the Gulf of Mexico, probably remaining right around Category 1 strength. But after that, again, dry air and some wind shear begin to work into the storm system, and even cooler ocean temperatures. And that helps to limit any strengthening and really even bring down the storm strength before landfall sometime later this week. So that is the good news. We'll take a look at a couple of models here just to show them to you. If I can click the right button, there we go. So here we go. This is this evening, again, a tropical storm, and I'll add this is the GFS model. Tropical storm moving through the Cayman Islands, pressure in the 980s, and then continuing to strengthen before finally impacting Cuba tomorrow afternoon as likely a Category 1 or 2 hurricane. So for it to be the first week in November, definitely a bit of a shock for a lot of people, I think. We normally don't get storms quite this strong this time of year. Not completely uncommon, but again, also not a yearly occurrence. Now, after that, on the GFS, the storm gets into the Gulf of Mexico. And again, you'll notice levels out in strength. This is Thursday morning. So not necessarily weakening for that first bit in the Gulf, but definitely just kind of maintaining itself and then eventually beginning a weakening trend as those harsh environmental conditions move in, and then making landfall as really just more of a tropical depression than anything, or a remnant low by Saturday afternoon into Louisiana and Mississippi. And I will also show you this as well before I show you the next model. These are the tracks for potential, or not potential, but for Tropical Storm Raphael. And you'll notice, again, most of our spaghetti models agree that this gets up here, does hook west a little bit into the Gulf, but then likely turning back north towards Louisiana. State names. Oh my goodness, Mississippi and Alabama as well. Now, some of our models, and I'm going to show you this map now because it kind of ties into our next one, do bring this all the way west and out towards Texas, which again are a bit of an outlier, but that is what the European model is showing. So I'll show you that one now. Again, I would ignore the strength numbers on the European. Just again, expect the same thing as the GFS through the near term, through the Cayman Islands tonight, into Cuba tomorrow afternoon as a hurricane, and then getting into the Gulf of Mexico, maintaining strength in and around hurricane status. But what the European does different is it continues that westward jog and doesn't really pull north, and kind of just kills this thing out over the western Gulf of Mexico. So again, just to remind you though, the forecast from the National Hurricane Center is this, which is again a track south of Louisiana here, beginning to weaken, much like we talked about, and then kind of stalling out a little bit in this part of the Gulf of Mexico. So the National Hurricane Center going with kind of an in-between of the GFS and the Euro, and that's probably a pretty safe bet. But either way, we're going to see rainfall impacts in the southeastern United States, and I'll show you why here in just a moment. But again, the center of the storm likely to kind of weaken south of Louisiana, and probably not really going to bring any sort of wind impacts to the United States and or surge impacts. Really going to be more of a kind of rainfall impact. And again, not even directly from the storm, really just more because of the moisture values and the precipitable water values that the storm is bringing northward. All right, now there are some differences in the models on total rainfall. This is the GFS now through Friday evening, and you'll notice a big swath of very heavy rainfall through the Midlands of South Carolina down into South Georgia and into the Florida Panhandle, kind of towards the Taylor County area. So again, some of these values are quite high, getting up and around half a foot of rain on the GFS, which would be enough to cause flooding concerns for sure. The good thing you'll notice, though, Western North Carolina, upstate South Carolina, northern Georgia, much less rainfall totals on the GFS model as that heavy axis of rain sets up over the Carolinas and Georgia. On the European model, however, a little bit different here. That whole rain band a little bit wider and shifts a little bit further north, but lower values, topping at maybe 5 inches in isolated spots, but widespread 2 to 4 inches of rain from Charlotte, Greenville, Spartanburg, Columbia, back down through Athens, Augusta, even at the southern half of the Atlanta suburbs, and then down into southwestern Georgia and the western panhandle of Florida, back towards the Destin and Panama City area. So again, I'm very briefly going to show this to you. I hadn't really planned on it until right now, but I think it's kind of a fun little meteorology tidbit. So you're probably wondering, well, the European had a completely different track. Why is it still showing rainfall up into the Carolinas and Georgia and kind of surrounding areas? Well, this is kind of the main reason why. It has to do with this moment in time right here. And again, we'll time out the rain in just a second, but we'll move this a little bit further ahead here. Right about here is probably a good place. So here's the storm system. These are our 500 millibar wind values, and look at kind of what's happening here. At 500 millibars, we have very slow winds coming into this big trough. And watch kind of what happens with these wind barb values. We have, again, slow winds right here, very slow, and then they're speeding up much quicker. If I could draw a pretty arrow, that would be nice. They're speeding up much quicker as it's entering this trough. So what this creates in the atmosphere is an area of divergence. So again, I'm going to use this good old-fashioned pen I have. So it's very slow winds, and then speeding up. And what happens is that creates a separation. Imagine two cars on a highway that start the same speed. that are riding bumper to bumper, and then the one ahead drives much quicker, you have a bigger gap, and that creates a bit of a vacuum in the atmosphere. And that vacuum leads to a lot of rising motion, and thus cloud cover and precipitation forms. And that's what's going to set up this heavy band of rain in the southeast. So just kind of a fun little meteorological tidbit there. And that's why we're going to see that. And again, we'll show you what that's going to look like on radar here in just a moment. All right, what's happening across the lower 48? Well, these are our daily MPing reports. What's happening? Well, a lot of rain for a lot of folks, a lot of green showing up on the map right now, and hopefully we can change this green to some blue here in the future, because I'm about tired of talking about rain in the tropics, to be quite honest with y'all. But again, obviously it's important, so we'll talk about whatever is happening. But yeah, big time storm system again, bringing all this rain across the country. You can see that on radar. Again, this is all rain east of the Rockies that is falling, even well up into Canada. Probably most of this is falling in the form of rainfall. Now we are seeing some mountain snow. Again, you'll notice how these radar returns back up here are a lot more wispy looking. This is mainly snow falling, and because of that, all sorts of watches, warnings, and advisories. In fact, check this out. We've even got some rain down into the Carolinas this morning. I know something you might have never thought you'd see again out here, but sure enough, it is happening, and we are seeing that rain begin to fall. So definitely a nice change of pace. Also a pretty foggy morning for a lot of folks here east of the Appalachian chain. So let's talk about those watches, warnings, and advisories. Again, fog in the east with some of these gray boxes from Raleigh, Norfolk, Richmond, and down and up into the Delmarva. The most concerning area for weather right now is down into the Ozarks of Arkansas and Missouri. A lot of flash flood warnings due to these trailing rain bands, flood watches all the way up to St. Louis. Flood warnings for a lot of these areas. So we went from a big time drought to flooding rains, which is unfortunately also often how it happens. So obviously that is a concern. Now out west, the concern is heavy mountain snow. The pink colors are winter storm warnings, winter weather advisories in the purple. And again, just a whole lot of snow falling in these higher elevations as storm after storm after storm has been crossing these regions. And probably going to be a theme through the winter with this La Nina pattern that we are dealing with. All right, today, severe weather threat. Yeah, we sure have it. Kind of a bimodal threat. One area up into Wisconsin from Madison and up into the Oshkosh area, into Antigua, and kind of, wow, there's not to be rude to anyone in Wisconsin. These are some weird town names, so now that I'm actually reading them. But up into Reedsburg and kind of just surrounding areas of the Interstate 94 corridor, and then up through the Interstate 39 corridor as well. So got to have a way to get those watches and warnings. Another area to watch down to the south of this big squall line from Memphis all the way back down to Galveston, Monroe, Louisiana, Greenville, Mississippi, Clarksdale, and even out into the Pine Bluff and El Dorado area of Arkansas. Now, this does include a tornado threat today for both regions. So again, have that on your radar, pun not intended. Tomorrow, another severe weather threat, this time into Florida. By the way, isn't it so nice that we can just scroll around on this map and I don't have to pull up a bunch of tabs? That is just beautiful. So thank you to the folks at WeatherWise for making this. But tomorrow, again, another tornado threat from the Keys all the way up into Southwest Florida, Cape Coral, Fort Myers, Marco Island, Homestead, and then obviously Key West itself going to have the risk of a couple tornadoes, and this is going to be due to our tropical system Raphael, again introducing a lot of wind shear and onshore rain bands that way. So we'll definitely watch for that. And then just to quickly show you day 3, a new area forming back out into Texas for potential severe weather. And I think in the long run, that is all. This is day 4, nothing. Day 5, nothing. Day 6, nothing. Day 7, nothing. And day 8, nothing. All right. So again, nothing from the National Hurricane Center or the Storm Prediction Center currently, but that will change. I think I do still expect severe weather this weekend. They're probably just waiting on more confidence to put anything on the map. All right, radar current, or radar that is expected for this afternoon. This is the high resolution rapid refresh model. I'm very quickly going to check. A new run is running right now. You know, we have enough of the new run. I'll show you that. So this will get us probably not all the way ahead into time, but this will get us almost through the next 48 hours. All right, so this afternoon, here you go, a lot of rain and with it a severe weather threat. Again, a couple areas up near the warm front into Wisconsin, some increased spin due to that interacting boundary there. And then down into Arkansas, Louisiana, an area of increased chances of severe weather due to higher instability values. and just enough wind shear left over as well that those two combined could cause some problems. But I'll tell you, this is about as easy of a well-defined mid-latitude cyclone as you'll get this time of year. Here's the warm front with all the rain along that, and then here's the rain all along down the cold front. Again, it has that very classic look to it. So a lot of rain for a lot of folks today, and then obviously severe weather in those areas that we have talked about. Also, again, rain to the south in the Carolinas, Georgia, Florida, seeing some scattered showers as we have kind of the slow beginnings of what is going to be that heavy rain from Raphael beginning to slowly work into the region by this evening. Again, all of this continuing across the country overnight tonight. Very heavy rainfall along that cold front through the Mississippi River Valley, even up through the Ohio River into southern Indiana, portions of Kentucky, then even up into the Detroit area, seeing some heavy rain, up into Ontario, Quebec overnight tonight. And then moving this further ahead into our Wednesday morning, here's the cold front. Again, not hard to find really, right along this axis of heavy rainfall. So we will need to watch for a bit of a flooding threat. Again, this rain is going to, it's just the direction that it's moving. It's kind of moving unidirectional, which is going to kind of train some of this over the same areas. Also tomorrow morning, heavy rain picking up down near Florida. That will be the start of, again, what Raphael brings to the table for that rainfall concern. When we get into Wednesday afternoon, and this is when that slug of moisture really comes out of the Gulf into the southeast, and you'll notice, look at this very heavy rainfall. This model, the HRRR, bringing that axis of heavy rain down into the low country of South Carolina, up through the Midlands, and down into the Savannah area of Georgia and the kind of north central part of Florida. So again, a little bit different on some of the models. We'll just have to wait and see really where that axis of heaviest rain sets up. But that gets us into our Wednesday evening. So that is as far out as that model goes. We'll take a look out west as well. And again, we'll switch models here to the 12Z now that we have most of it run. So you're kind of lucky getting to be the first to see it. And I'm the first to see it with you. All right, this afternoon, again, heavy mountain snow to the northern Rockies, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, down into Colorado and Utah. That will continue to fall. Low pressure developing here now down towards Colorado, and kind of honestly two areas of low pressure in a way developing. This is overnight tonight into tomorrow. Here's one area of low pressure, and then obviously this other area showing up on its own. And because of both of them getting increased precipitation and increased lift along both of these regions of the Rockies, again, this is going to dump very heavy mountain snow overnight tonight. By the time we're waking up Wednesday morning, check this out. Some of that snow even breaking containment of the Rockies. We've got snow falling in Denver, even the extreme western portion of Kansas, seeing some of those big flakes fly for our Wednesday morning. And continuing through the afternoon, this band of snow definitely will be interesting to see how much of it falls, but I do expect a lot. This gets all the way into overnight Wednesday. Again, this is all Wednesday afternoon, folks. I mean, it's just snowing and snowing and snowing through some of these same areas. And then by the time we get into overnight Wednesday, early morning hours of Thursday, that snow band continues. And again, even creeping into the extreme panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma here as well. So definitely exciting to see some snow outside of just the Rockies. I'm sure you folks out there will be excited to see it as well as that kind of begins to work on through. All right, so, let's kind of pick up where we left off here, which was early Thursday morning. So, again, kind of the map Thursday morning. Very heavy rainfall in the southeast. You'll notice that band there. And then snow, probably not being picked up quite as well in this model, but snow back out into portions of New Mexico, Colorado, and even Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, kind of into that region. Now we get further into Thursday afternoon. Heavy rainfall remains in the southeast and snow remaining in those same regions of the southern Rockies and even outside of the Rockies, again, as I mentioned. And this will lead way to our next storm system. You'll notice all this precipitation beginning Thursday afternoon into Friday across the southern plains, also continuing to rain pretty heavily across the southeast. And then eventually we get to Friday afternoon, and here's the start of that next storm system. Again, clearing out a little bit into the Carolinas as we lose some of that upper level divergence that I mentioned earlier. But at this point, both of our storm systems likely beginning to kind of work in tandem, our tropical storm and our mid-latitude cyclone. and that will likely lead to a pretty big another slew of rain through much of the country during the weekend, probably more severe weather. And then this crosses up into the Midwest by this coming weekend, works on through there, and then we get a little bit of a lull early next week. But in the long run, yeah, here we go again. Another big time storm system to talk about. So rainfall totals, this is kind of the first batch of rain. Plus our tropical system. So let me back this up just a little bit. So this is now through Thursday evening. Again, a swath of rain where our cold front is moving through, and then a heavy swath of rain into the southeast due to kind of that influx of tropical moisture and some divergence aloft like we talked about, which obviously on its own right is going to bring plenty of rain. But then we get next week's storm system. That's going to bring another big slew of rain to the country. And after that, again, we just continue to add more to it as more of these storm systems cross. But overall, this is now through this coming Tuesday. So really the next week or so, a pretty good amount of rain in the plains, a good amount of rain into Georgia, South Carolina due to that tropical system, but still remaining pretty dry along the I-95 corridor from Maine down to Raleigh, we'll say. So definitely an area out there that is still dry and could use some rain, but we are going to slowly increase rain chances further east with the pattern through this week. Snowfall now through this weekend. Again, you'll notice snow getting outside of the Rockies here into the Texas, Oklahoma Panhandle, and then into western Nebraska and Kansas, where overall in those places, it'll depend on where you're at, but it could see a good 1 to 3 inches of snow in isolated spots, even seeing 3 to 5 inches of snow. But the real snowfall winners will be into the mountains of New Mexico and southern Colorado, where we could see, more than 2 or 3 feet of snow over the next couple of days through this weekend, and then heavy snow up into the northern Rockies as well. After that, again, we'll just continue to pile it on here with that next storm system. And then maybe in the 10-day range, we can finally get a well-defined storm or snowstorm into the plains. Again, it's getting about that time of the year, mid-November by that point. So you would definitely expect to see that to become more common through the coming weeks. All right, folks, that's all I got for you on this election day. Again, just hopefully, we all have a good one. Hopefully, the country has a good one. And just more importantly, hopefully we can come together and heal no matter the results of tonight. I think that's really what we should be focusing on. So with that said, y'all have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. Enjoy it. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you all tomorrow.